Welcome to Life Stories, where every tale is a journey filled with mystery, discovery, and profound lessons. Today, we bring you the story of Emily, a woman who inherits an old antique shop from her late Uncle Jack. What seems like a burdensome legacy soon unfolds into a thrilling adventure, as Emily uncovers hidden secrets and treasures that lead her on a quest to find the legendary Heart of Eternity. Join us as we explore the twists and turns of this incredible journey. Subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's adventure and stay tuned for more captivating tales. The day Uncle Jack passed away was a day I will never forget. It wasn't just the loss of an uncle, but the loss of someone who had been my rock, my confidant, and my guide through life. He wasn't just family to me, he was more like a father. Someone who had been there through every heartbreak, every failure, and every moment when I felt utterly alone. When his lawyer handed me the envelope with his will, I felt an unease ripple through me. I braced myself for what it might say, though I had no idea how much it would alter the course of my life. To my dear niece Emily, the will began. I leave behind my most cherished possession, Jack's treasures. The words echoed in my mind. Over and over again, I stared at them in disbelief. My heart sank. Jack's treasures? That old, crumbling antique shop on the corner of River Road? The place had been in desperate need of repair for as long as I could remember. And it had barely stayed afloat, surviving only on the occasional passing tourist or nostalgic neighbor stopping by to poke around its cluttered shelves. The windows were smudged and grimy. The wooden floors creaked underfoot, and the scent of dust and mothballs always seemed to hang in the air, lingering in the corners of the room. How could Uncle Jack consider this place his most cherished possession? I couldn't fathom it. I had expected perhaps some money, maybe even a simple keepsake to remember him by. Anything but the shop. The thought of inheriting it filled me with dread. My life was already chaotic enough, working 2 jobs to make ends meet and trying to juggle bills and dreams that always seemed just out of reach. Now, I was supposed to take care of this relic. A shop that seemed to be nothing more than a reminder of a past that no longer had a place in the modern world. I stood outside the shop later that afternoon, staring up at the faded sign above the door, tears welling in my eyes, not just from grief, but from frustration. I didn't know what to do with it. Why had Uncle Jack left me this burden? Was it some kind of cruel joke? My thoughts swirled with confusion and doubt. But then I remembered something that made me pause. Uncle Jack had never been one to do anything without reason. He had always been meticulous, thoughtful, almost maddeningly deliberate about everything he did. Perhaps there was more to this than met the eye. Perhaps, if I gave it a chance, I would discover something in this shop that would explain why he thought it was so important. With a deep breath, I pushed open the creaky door and stepped inside. The bell above the entrance jingled softly, announcing my arrival. The shop was dimly lit, and as I moved deeper into the space, dust motes floated lazily in the shafts of sunlight that managed to slip through the grimy windows. Shelves lined the walls, crammed with all sorts of objects, porcelain dolls with cracked faces, tarnished silver candlesticks, and mismatched pocket watches that were rusted beyond recognition. A glass display case near the front held various keys, some of which appeared to be ancient. In the center of the room was a long table, littered with yellowed books, chipped figurines, and other odds and ends that seemed to have little in common. I stood there for a moment, taking in the weight of the place, letting it settle around me. The air was thick with memories of childhood afternoons spent sitting cross-legged on the floor while Uncle Jack regaled me with tales of the items around us. Each piece, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, had its own story. Some of the stories were funny, some were tragic, but they were always told with such a sense of wonder that I couldn't help but listen. Uncle Jack had a way of making the past come alive. My gaze drifted toward the back of the shop, where a narrow hallway led to his office. That room had always been off limits to me growing up. Business matters, Uncle Jack would say with a wink whenever I asked why I couldn't go in. But now, curiosity gnawed at me. I wondered what I might find, perhaps a note, a ledger, or anything that could explain why he thought this shop was worth inheriting. Maybe there was something hidden in that office that would make sense of all of this. I opened the door to his office, which creaked under my touch. It was a modest space, dominated by a heavy oak desk piled high with papers. Faded maps hung on the walls, and a rickety bookshelf sagged under the weight of leather-bound volumes. I began sifting through the clutter, hoping to find something, anything, that would shed light on what Uncle Jack had left behind. That's when I noticed something odd about the far wall. There was a faint outline etched into the plaster, almost invisible unless you were standing close enough to see it. Heart pounding, I pressed my hands against the wall, searching for a seam or a latch. After several tense minutes, my fingers brushed against a small indentation, hidden beneath a loose strip of molding. I pushed gently, and to my surprise, the wall shifted slightly before swinging inward with a soft click. Behind the office wall lay a hidden room, untouched by time. The air was different here, cleaner, cooler, and the light filtering through a single high-set window illuminated shelves upon shelves of artifacts unlike anything I had seen in the main shop. These weren't dusty trinkets or forgotten relics, these were treasures. Gold coins gleamed in velvet-lined boxes. Intricate jewelry sparkled under the light, and ancient scrolls rested carefully in protective cases. At the center of the room sat a pedestal holding a small, ornate box, carved with symbols I didn't recognize. My breath caught in my throat as I stepped closer, running my fingers lightly over the smooth surface of the box. Whatever this was, it clearly meant something important to Uncle Jack. In that moment, everything changed. I began to understand that this shop wasn't a burden at all. It was a gateway to something far greater. Was this the real reason Uncle Jack had left me the shop? Had he known all along that I would discover this hidden room? This secret he had protected for so many years? The weight of his legacy now pressed heavily on my shoulders. What had I gotten myself into? I spent the next few days in a haze, overwhelmed by what I had discovered. Every spare moment I had was spent in that hidden room, poring over the treasures, trying to piece together their significance. Some of the items came with notes, written in Uncle Jack's neat handwriting, detailing their origins and the stories behind them. Each artifact seemed to carry a weight of history, as though it had a part to play in something far larger than I could comprehend. But there were other items, too, pieces with no obvious history, their stories locked away in silence. I couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency. There was something about this room, this collection, that was calling to me. Was it just my imagination? Or did these artifacts contain some deeper meaning? Something I was meant to unlock? As the days went by, I grew increasingly consumed by the mystery. One evening, as I sat cross-legged on the floor surrounded by scrolls and documents, I found something that would change everything. Tucked inside a hollowed-out book was a small, leather-bound journal. Its pages were filled with sketches, cryptic phrases, and detailed descriptions of the items I had seen in the hidden room. At first, it seemed like nothing more than a collection of random thoughts. But as I flipped through the pages, a pattern began to emerge. This wasn't just a journal, it was a map. A map leading somewhere. But where? The entries grew more urgent as the journal progressed. There were mentions of a final destination, and warnings of dangers along the way. The journal's tone shifted from casual observations to a sense of desperate need. And then, one passage stood out to me more than any other. Clara must know the truth. She is the key. My heart skipped a beat as I read those words. My name. Was Uncle Jack trying to tell me something? What truth was he referring to? And what did he mean by the key? I couldn't stop thinking about it. Why had he left me all of this? Was I truly the one who was supposed to uncover whatever secret lay hidden in these treasures? I couldn't ignore it any longer. I needed to know more. The clues were there, scattered throughout the artifacts, in the journal, and perhaps most importantly, in the map. I had to follow it. But where would it lead me? The first step took me to a small, old library in downtown Riverbend. It was the kind of place that smelled of old paper and dust, with shelves crammed full of books that hadn't seen much attention in years. I scoured the dusty tomes and old microfiche records, searching for any hint of the name Elias Montgomery, a 19th-century explorer whose name had appeared in Uncle Jack's journal. Montgomery was rumored to have uncovered a legendary artifact known as the Heart of Eternity. According to legend, the heart was said to grant immense power to whoever possessed it, but at a terrible cost. Could this be what Uncle Jack had been searching for all these years? And if so, why had he chosen me to continue his work? The more I dug, the more questions arose. Who else knew about this artifact? Was there someone else searching for it? Someone who might try to stop me from uncovering the truth? The deeper I went, the more I felt eyes watching me. Strange things began to happen. I would catch glimpses of figures lingering just out of sight. Shadows that seemed to follow me in the streets. Whispers that faded before I could make sense of them. It wasn't until I returned to the shop one afternoon that I realized just how serious things had become. The lock on the front door had been tampered with. Although nothing appeared to be missing, the feeling of violation was palpable. It was as though someone knew what I had found, and they were willing to do whatever it took to stop me from uncovering more. Paranoia began to creep in, tightening its grip with each passing day. Yet, despite the fear gnawing at me, I couldn't turn back. I had come this far, and I knew I was on the brink of uncovering something monumental. Uncle Jack had entrusted me with this quest, and now, it was up to me to see it through. I had to follow the trail, no matter where it led. One night, unable to sleep, I returned to the hidden room. I opened the ornate box that had been resting on the pedestal. Inside was a compass, dark and intricate, its metal surface gleaming in the dim light. I picked it up and felt an odd sensation surge through me. The needle of the compass spun wildly, as though it were alive, before it suddenly stopped, pointing directly at the wall. I followed its direction, my heart racing with anticipation. The wall, once solid and unyielding, shifted. Another hidden compartment appeared, and inside, there was a rolled-up parchment tied with a red ribbon. My hands shook as I unfurled the map. It was more detailed than the one in the journal, marking locations across the globe, from faraway islands to distant mountains. At the bottom of the map, in Uncle Jack's unmistakable handwriting, were 3 words: "Trust your instincts." Tears blurred my vision as I realized the gravity of what lay before me. Uncle Jack hadn't just left me a collection of artifacts. He had left me a map to something far more important, something that, if I understood correctly, could change everything. This was no longer just about uncovering some forgotten treasure. It was about proving to myself that I could do this, that I was capable of great things. Uncle Jack had believed in me, and now it was time to trust in myself and the path he had set before me. I wasn't sure what dangers lay ahead, but I knew that I couldn't turn back now. The journey had already begun. The next few days passed in a blur of preparations. I packed what I thought I would need, though I wasn't quite sure what lay ahead. The map was clear in some ways but vague in others, pointing me toward distant lands. Locations with no clear meaning to me, at least not yet. The compass Uncle Jack had left me in the ornate box seemed to hum with energy. Its needle always steady, pointing the way forward. Each day that passed, the weight of the task ahead pressed heavier on my shoulders. But I couldn't afford to hesitate. I had to trust my instincts, just as Uncle Jack had urged. The first location led me to the mist-covered hills of Scotland. I boarded the plane with a mix of excitement and fear, knowing that each step I took would bring me closer to answers, but also deeper into a world that was filled with uncertainty. The journey to Scotland was long and tiring, but there was no turning back now. As the plane descended toward the tiny station near the hills, I felt a sense of both wonder and trepidation. The landscape was wild and untouched, like something out of a fairy tale, and I couldn't help but wonder if this place held the answers I had been seeking. The train ride to the hills was quiet, the only sounds being the occasional hiss of the steam engine and the distant cries of birds. As the train wound its way through the rugged terrain, I kept thinking of Uncle Jack and his stories. His voice seemed to echo in my mind, reminding me of how much he had believed in me. I had always thought of him as a guiding light in my life. But now, I realized that he had prepared me for something much greater than I had ever imagined. When I arrived at the small station, the cold drizzle greeted me, a constant reminder of how far removed I was from the world I had known. The path to the old monastery was steep and winding, but it felt strangely familiar, as though I had been here before, in some other time or place. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and moss, and the only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the soft, rhythmic patter of rain. The monastery, perched atop a hill, stood in silent grandeur, its ancient stones weathered by centuries of wind and rain. As I approached the entrance, I felt a wave of both awe and unease. According to Uncle Jack's journal, this place had once been a refuge for Elias Montgomery, the explorer whose name had been mentioned so many times in his writings. It was here, in the shadows of this forgotten place, that Montgomery had hidden something of great value, the heart of eternity. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew that it had to be here. I pressed forward, determined to uncover whatever secrets lay hidden within the monastery's crumbling walls. The air inside was thick with decay. The once beautiful stained glass windows now shattered and broken. The floor was strewn with debris, fallen beams, broken pottery, and rotting books. Despite the ruin, there was a sense of history here, as though the very stones held memories of times long past. I pulled out the compass, feeling its weight in my hand as the needle began to spin wildly. It finally settled, pointing toward a narrow corridor that led deeper into the building. With each step I took, the air grew heavier, and the silence more oppressive. I moved carefully, feeling both the excitement of discovery and the weight of Uncle Jack's words in my heart. Following the compass's direction, I reached a large chamber at the heart of the monastery. Its ceiling soared high above, supported by towering columns that seemed to stretch into the heavens. At the center of the room was an altar, cracked and weathered, but still bearing faint traces of gold leaf. As I approached the altar, I felt a sense of reverence, as if the very air had been charged with centuries of secrets. On the altar, nestled within a delicate stone box, was a small leather-bound book. My heart raced as I reached for it, half expecting something to spring into action, some hidden trap or mechanism. But nothing happened. I carefully opened the book, and as I flipped through the pages, I realized that it wasn't just a diary or a collection of thoughts. It was a guide. A guide that would lead me to the next part of the map, showing me where to go and what to seek. As I read further, I understood that this was only the beginning. There was more to uncover, more to understand, and more to fear, but there was no turning back. This journey had already claimed me, and now it was up to me to see it through. Suddenly, a sound interrupted my thoughts, a low, guttural growl reverberating through the chamber. I whirled around, instinctively reaching for anything I could use to defend myself. Emerging from the shadows was a figure, cloaked in darkness, their face obscured by a hood. In their hands, they carried a staff topped with a glowing crystal, casting eerie reflections on the walls. "You shouldn't have come here," they said in a voice that sent a chill down my spine. The words felt like a warning, a threat, but I wasn't sure who they were or what they wanted. "I'm looking for answers," I replied, trying to steady my voice. "I need to know about the heart of eternity." At the mention of the heart, the figure stiffened. For a brief moment, silence hung in the air, thick and heavy. Then, without warning, they lunged at me, swinging the staff with terrifying speed. I dodged, narrowly avoiding the blow, and scrambled backward, adrenaline flooding my veins. But before either of us could make another move, the ground beneath our feet trembled. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and the walls cracked. The figure froze, their expression shifting from aggression to alarm. Without a word, they turned and fled into the darkness, leaving me alone in the chamber, my heart racing with the realization that this journey was far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. I didn't have time to reflect. The mystery was far from over, and the next step of my quest was already calling to me. As I stood there in the dimly lit chamber, heart pounding from the encounter with the mysterious figure, I realized the journey had only just begun. The stakes were higher than I could have ever imagined. and the dangers ahead were far greater than I had prepared for. Yet, in the depths of my soul, I knew there was no turning back. Uncle Jack had entrusted me with this mission, and I had come too far to let fear hold me back. The heart of eternity was still out there, and it was up to me to uncover its secrets. With the compass in hand and the map leading me toward the next destination, I steeled myself for the road ahead. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together, but the truth was still elusive, shrouded in mystery and danger. As I stepped out of the monastery, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that forces beyond my control were closing in. But I wouldn't be deterred. The journey would test my courage, my resolve, and my very identity. What Uncle Jack had left behind was not just a treasure hunt, it was a journey of self-discovery. One that would challenge me in ways I could never have imagined. The heart of eternity might hold unimaginable power, but I knew that the real treasure was in the lessons I would learn along the way. I took a deep breath, setting my sights on the next destination. There was much more to uncover, and I was ready for whatever came next. For more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the Life Stories channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest videos.